The once picturesque town of Schuld on the windy River Ahr. Many of the empty spaces below once had quaint medieval houses on them. The streets are still made of mud, and the thank you on the bridge that had its top taken off by the torrent is meant for the local volunteers, not for the federal government. In July, this and dozens of other towns brought Germany and Rainer Himmes face to face with the climate crisis. His smartphone is choked with images of a day that still gives him nightmares. He and his terrified family were watching the water wash away their livelihood from the third floor of their home, which is still drying out after 9 weeks. He took me on a tour of his backyard. Rainer had made good money from leasing rides for fun fairs, a thriving business, especially in the summer and carnival seasons, until COVID shut him down. He'd already been locked down by the lockdown. I mean, he was virtually bankrupt at the beginning of last year, and then this happened on top of everything else, and basically most of his equipment, most of the stuff, some of which had just been renovated, was swept away and destroyed. This is one of the few things that's still around. Up by the church, the local community have set up a crisis centre in a container. A hive of civic triage where they provide everything from insurance advice to bottled water, especially for those that still lack the running kind. Divine intervention was missing in action on the day of the floods, but the church itself has been turned into a temple to the generosity of strangers. It looks pretty impressive, doesn't it? This is German efficiency at work with all the donations. All these trousers here are for men, on this side for women, and then they are ordered precisely according to size. 30, 31, 32, and on it goes. Thank Ulla, chief sorter and local matriarch. Her family had run the only bakery in town for 5 generations, until the water had other plans and destroyed the building. Als das Haus abgerissen worden ist, das muss Ihnen sehr wehgetan haben.
Ich bin nicht gucken. Meine Nichte hat angerufen, hat mich gefragt, ob ich mich verabschieden wollte. Ich konnte das nicht. Ich habe geheult, Rotz und Wasser.
All in all, this catastrophe, with almost 200 dead and billions of euros in damage, was the brutal wake-up call for those who still doubted the reality of climate change. A tragedy, but also a huge opportunity, in theory, for them. Germany's Green Party.
Hallo Mainz! Hallo zusammen!
Downriver in Mainz, on the mighty Rhine, they're holding an election rally. Annalena Baerbock wants to replace Angela Merkel as Chancellor. She is the freshest face in frontline German politics, and her message, to put it simply, is this: it's time for a root and branch political revolution that does justice to the enormous challenges of social inequality, but also, of course, climate change. And just before the summer floods, her party even led in the polls.
A quick question for British television.
No interviews today, I'm sorry, I have to leave very soon.
Of late, she's been damaged by some gaffes on the campaign trail, and as a former championship trampolinist, she knows all about things going up and down, and that includes opinion polls. Back in Schuld in the muddy flood zone, Rainer Himmes is adamant that the Greens should not benefit politically from the disaster.
Ich glaube es nicht und ich hoffe es sehr, dass sie keine Stimmen bekommen aus dem Ahrtal.
Also Sie wollen keine grüne Regierung sehen? Nee.
Garantiert nicht.
Auch nicht in der Koalition?
Nein.
In particular, he blames conservation policies from having prevented the local authorities from clearing the trees that clogged the river, creating a dangerous build-up of water. But it's broader than that. Science may be on their side, but the Greens are still seen as too edgy for middle-class, middle-aged, middle-of-the-road Germany. I put this to one of their star candidates, Nika Slawik, set to become the first trans member of the Bundestag.
Well, first of all, we're still doing very well with the younger voters. Yeah. They're all coming to us and they talk to us in this election and are saying we really need to do something about climate change now, and we can't find it with the Conservatives. Yeah. But at the same time, some older people maybe think Annalena Baerbock is too disruptive as a candidate herself because she's only 40 years old. But I think it would be good for us because we really need big changes in this decade.
Just how big? As big as this sinkhole caused by the flood. Looking at this mini Grand Canyon, a short drive away from the city of Cologne, it's really hard to imagine what was here before, which is basically one flat field. But on that one night in the middle of July, everything was sucked into the sinkhole, including 4 houses and 30 cars. It's an astonishing level of destruction that no one here could have imagined. The hole is as gaping as the question: how do elected leaders persuade their voters to make the sacrifices necessary to save the planet? And as the chances of seeing the first Chancellor from the Green Party seem to be fading away somewhat, for young voters here, the climate emergency is the dominant issue, and they're calling for urgent action to slow down global warming. A group of 6 young climate activists are in their 4th week of a hunger strike after they pitched their tents in a Berlin park in the government district, urging politicians to stick to their electoral commitments on tackling climate emergencies. Well, joining me now from Berlin is Reinhard Bütikofer, member of the European Parliament and former co-chair of the German Green Party. Thanks very much for coming on the programme, Mr. Bütikofer. As I said earlier, the Greens were doing very well this summer. They were the lead party in the polls at one stage. They seem to have slipped somewhat. Is it now impossible, do you think, in this election for Germany to have the world's first Green Chancellor?
Well, Matt, I would say that the one thing that you can know for sure at this moment is that you will have the strongest Green Party ever after this election. We are probably going to double the vote that we achieved 4 years ago. And when you recall that we managed to create a consensus and be successful with the nuclear phase-out 20 years ago, when we just mustered less than 7% of the vote, you should trust in us with all the support from particularly the young generation that we will make very good use of the support that we get.
So do you think it is now inevitable, strong word, inevitable that the Greens will be part of the ruling coalition after next Sunday's election?
No, that is not the case. There is hardly ever anything inevitable in politics, but there's a very strong argument going in our favor, and this is first and foremost, obviously, the climate change and environmental argument. But in addition to that, we're also pushing strong for some social policies. For instance, fighting child poverty. We're working on issues like industrial policy to promote digital and green innovation. And we're also standing out from other parties because we are more ready than others to stand up for human rights and foreign policy and to combine dialogue with toughness when you have to talk to authoritarian leaders.
Okay, talking of authoritarian leaders, what about Vladimir Putin? The Nord Stream 2 pipeline project is very controversial in this country. This is the one that would give you, all the energy you need for the winter and beyond. The Russians have not supplied what you need. Some people say it's basically blackmailing Germany into signing on the dotted line because the project is almost completed. What should the Green Party do about this?
Well, I am indeed suspicious that this is a kind of blackmail. This is why I have teamed up with colleagues from 4 other political groups in the European Parliament to ask the European Commission to look into this Russian behavior under the competition rules that we have in the European Union. Apart from that, the pipeline has been constructed, but it has not yet received the green light because it's not yet living up to the challenge posed by the European Gas Directive. So the pipeline has to conform to European energy legislation. Unless that happens, this pipeline cannot go into operation, and we will see to it that the letter and the spirit of the regulation will be enforced.
Okay, interesting stuff. We'll be watching. Rainer Butikofer, thank you very much indeed.